Recording in progress.
Yes, Miss Machalamba, recording in progress. Good morning, honorable members, and good morning to our staff in Parliament. Thank you very much for logging in. Good morning to those who have joined as wanting to engage with the Portfolio Committee. I welcome you to this meeting, a continuation of engagements and consultations with certain institutions, individuals in the country who love to engage the Portfolio Committee on this tobacco bill. Let us start by observing a moment of silence and meditation, praying for a successful day for us and our families and the country. Okay, thank you very much. May I therefore request members as a reminder that though we are sitting in the virtual platform, this meeting is deemed to be sitting in the precinct of Parliament, and therefore all rules and regulations that apply to a meeting in Parliament will also apply to our meeting. Ms. Machalamba, can you indicate who are the honorable members who have logged in? Thank you. Have I been talking alone, Ms. Machalamba?
Oh, sorry about that, Chair. Sorry, Chair. Present is Dr. Dlomo, Ms. Xhego, Ms. Sine, Ms. Khumalo, Ms. Clark, Mr. Mutubatsi, Ms. Mailola, Mr. Van Staden, and Dr. Lehlape. I've received an apology from Dr. Leroux. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Welcome, honorable members, and we note those apologies and therefore will continue. Today we are going to have two presentations. One is going to be started by Agri South Africa. Welcome to the team that will introduce themselves as soon as I come out of this talking. You will be allocated 30 minutes and not more just to engage with the Portfolio Committee. We have received your presentation. Thank you very much. So we have gone through it, but we still give you this platform to take us through your presentation. Thereafter, honorable members will engage with you in the form of clarity questions. We'll come back again to then deal with that session, and then we will then close it at that level. We are hopefully joined by the Department of Health because they are the ones who brought this bill to us, and therefore it will assist them to continuously be with us so that when we do need them sometime in the future to comment and contribute on those issues that are coming up here, they will be able to be well conversant. Let me then request the team from Agri SA to take their 30 minutes from now and introduce the members who are there. Thank you very much.
Good morning, Chair. My name is Jan Sarabi from Agri SA. Together with me, I have colleagues that are going to be able to assist me with technical questions on it. But from myself, Agri SA, Jan Sarabi this morning. Chair, with your permission, just as the presentation gets flighted, I'm not sure whether that's my responsibility or whether it's from the organizers of the event to put the presentation up.
It's your discussion with our team whether you would want to present your presentation and be given sharing rights, or you'd ask them to do so. I don't know what had transpired in your discussion.
If I might share my screen, Chair, I think that I have it on already. I hope you can see it. If you could confirm to me whether the presentation that I have is flighted on your screen as well.
Yeah, just go on a slideshow. We can see your presentation now. Thank you.
There we go. So, Chair, that's always such a tricky part, to have a slide show and talk about introductions without having anything before one. But for the record, this is the Agri SA presentation to the Portfolio Committee on Health on the Tobacco Products and Electronic Delivery Systems Control Bill 33 of 2022. for the record. I want to give you an overview of what our slides or our presentation is going to be. You see it on your slide now. I'm going to have a brief introduction about who I am and who Agri SA is. A little bit about why Agri SA particularly cares about this bill, why we have a central concern and what the implications are, the specific risks, the constitutional and procedural gaps, our proposals, and then a conclusion on that. Again, our sincere thanks to the honourable members of the Portfolio Committee on Health for the opportunity to present to you on this tobacco bill, if I can call it that way, fortunately for convenience purposes. Chair, it really is an honour. It's not something that Agri SA takes for granted. The institution of Parliament is the vital, important platform for us to engage on topics of enormous importance, not only to the agricultural sector, as we all know, but in all walks of life in our society. And as this presentation unfolds, I think the importance of a well and proper functioning legislative, enforcement, and legal system will become apparent. That is the essence of what we're going to be talking about. Just a little bit of background about Agri SA. This year we're celebrating our 120th year anniversary since our inception. We're the largest agricultural federation. We consist of 9 provincial affiliates. We have 26 commodity organisation members and 41 corporate members. We support an agricultural industry. Actually, I'm going to stop my video to stop me distracting myself in this. But we support an agricultural industry by managing the risks it faces. We collaborate with other stakeholders, including government entities, to develop sustainable policy solutions and facilitate the growth of agriculture for the benefit of the sector and the economy. Our organisation stands very close to farmers, to primary producers of our country's food, fibre sector, agriculture, all in all. You'll see that a lot of what we do relates to our 9 provincial affiliates, which is very close to the province, to the farmers themselves. But those commodity organisations and corporate members who form part of the body of the agricultural value chain is equally important. And I don't think we can have a discussion without including and referencing them to what we say and how this actually affects this bill in particular affects the entire value chain. So our organisation is made up of producers and stretches all the way to the retail sector throughout the value chain. Our presentation will be highlighting the key risks contained in the bill and the negative effect it will have on the tobacco farming industry in particular, as well as then, as I said, the tobacco value chain in its greater sense. In 2023, we did provide submissions to the Portfolio Committee, and that those submissions are available from the Secretariat if the committee deems it necessary to go. So, and we do encourage and appreciate the committee's attention to our previous submissions, which are more detailed, obviously, than present purposes in the slides, and that we're going to be talking about today. Then the second slide, I hope you can see it well. The reason that Agri SA cares, this tobacco industry is under enormous pressure. And the tobacco manufacturing industry and the primary production of tobacco in South Africa is under enormous pressure for various reasons. Since 2019, and that is significant, obviously, due to COVID, and the enormous effect that incidence had on our sector and our country and our economy as a whole. But since 2019, we've lost 49% of all tobacco growers in South Africa. That's a total number of, falling from 322 to 165 producers today. And the main reason for that is due to illegal tobacco production. When I say, we've lost, almost half of producers, one shouldn't look at the figures alone. One should really think about the loss in that context as businesses being lost. Production, obviously, employment opportunities, but then also a whole system that supports it. Not only the value chain in economic sense, but also governance and government's role, which supports legal production of a commodity, which has its faults. We acknowledge that, certainly so, but a one that still contributes an enormous amount to the economy. We've referenced those figures in the presentation, where it's estimated that the contributed gross value add amounts to almost 48.4 billion rand. That's an enormous figure, Chair, and it needs to be properly contextualized. That is really the entire sector's value and monetary terms, as well as broader societal terms, I suppose one could deem it that way, to the economy. We're not only talking about duties and value-added tax. We're talking about the job creation opportunities, the regulatory function, the value chain, transport, retail, you name it. So it's an enormous part of the agricultural value chain in particular. And I've made that point. Each farmer sustains farm workers, seed suppliers, agronomists, truckers, mechanics, millwrights, township retailers within those areas that desperately need that economic injection, such as Limpopo, Mpumalanga, Northwest, as well as other provinces in the country. So when we lose farmers, and this is something that Agri SA particularly seeks to prevent, to mitigate to the degree possible for all the reasons that I think we're all well versed in, is when we lose the farmers from the land, livelihoods are threatened and even decimated, especially in the rural areas where it's so desperately needed. And I think the slide, it's not there for sanctimonious or for ulterior purposes, but this is what it's about. It's about livelihoods, it's about people. It really is about people, and making sure that in South Africa we retain those jobs, those skills, those livelihoods for the people that really need it more than anyone else. So our central concern with respect to the tobacco bill, as I've been, is that research from various well-regarded, extremely highly regarded institutions show that between 60 and 70% of cigarettes sold in South Africa are illicit, unlawful. That is a staggering figure for a sector and for a value chain to sustain altogether. And I think the reasons will become clear as we speak about it later on. But having a valuable sector and value chain and commodity such as the tobacco commodity in South Africa to be essentially 60 to 70% illegal has enormous knock-on effects, not only for the production of cigarettes, but also the societal implications with illegality altogether. And those societal implications have been well documented. There's been a lot of media attention given to illicit tobacco trade in South Africa. Sometimes it goes under or it's forgotten to a degree, but this is a societal problem that needs to be addressed. So it's not only about farming, it's also about illegality in South Africa and the crime that we know is such a scourge about our country that comes into play when you talk about illicit tobacco production, imports, and illegal sales of cigarettes in particular. So we're getting to the point, but we need to have proper regulation, legislation to regulate this sector properly and worthwhile. So those costs to society are not borne by everybody to the degree that we actually demonstrate in our submissions. As I said in the beginning, the reduction in tobacco farmers can be directly attributed to what we regard, and it's been decided upon that the unconstitutional tobacco sales ban, which was implemented subsequent to COVID state of disaster having been declared. It is indeed a powerful demonstration of the futility of prohibition and the readiness of illicit traders to use regulatory measures to their advantage at the expense of all of us. So no law, no matter how well it's drafted, can work while at least 2/3 of the market ignores it. It simply doesn't work, but it leads to a greater issue of illegality in South Africa in the way that our economy can't afford it, but legislature and enforcement agencies battle to grapple with the impacts of it. We feel that the bill in its current form adds layers of regulation on the compliant 30% or odd 30% of legal tobacco producers. And it essentially leaves 60 to 70% of those illicit traders and producers, importers, that in almost value chain of crime, untouched. And our point there is that it will only accelerate the shift to illegal brands further shrinking the already crippled legal market, and we fear extinguish the commercial and small-scale tobacco production system in South Africa entirely. Turning to the specific issues and risks which we see and have identified in the bill, the first being the retail display ban and standardized packaging, which is proposed by the bill. We know that in our informal sector, where unfortunately more than 80% of cigarettes are sold and mostly as single stick, loose straws, as I used to know them as a university, from tabletops and hiding products is unenforceable, prohibiting that, and invites essentially the under-the-counter sales. So this is a sector, as with many of those that have a potential harmful impact on society and on the health of persons, where the legality and the transparency and the enforcement systems related to that needs to be fully and properly regulated. And this contributes to the points that we make in our issues that we have with the bill. So not only the retail display ban, but also talk about the uniform packs, which is proposed essentially making packs indistinguishable from one another. That will support counterfeiting. It will make it easier for people to sell cigarettes illegally, because illegal and legal cigarette production or production companies will not be distinguishable from one another. It will also deprive enforcement officers from the visual clues to spot illegal stock, and it will deprive consumers from a way to distinguish the genuine product. So that is counterproductive. We feel that that'll not serve the aims of what we want to achieve with a well-regulated tobacco industry. The second risk we've identified is, unfortunately, broad, unfettered ministerial powers allowed for in the bill as it stands. Essentially, sections 9(7) and 15 of the bill allow for future rules to otherwise further the objects of the Act to be created by the Minister without parliamentary oversight. And that, we feel, is an unfettered competence which should not be lawful. This is a sector which places enormous reliance on government as a whole, not only the legislative branch of government, obviously also the executive, and then the judicial as well, as far as the enforcement of it is concerned. And we can't have that system where a minister is actually granted the unfettered powers which the bill actually allows for as it stands currently. This endangers policy certainty for the tobacco value chain, and it makes it impossible for a sector to actually operate legally, and together with legally also financially sustainably and viably in that sense. Banks and financial institutions don't like gaps in legislative regulation of a sector when it comes to, for instance, providing loans for those inputs that are required and vital for the production of tobacco in South Africa in total. Second risks we see is the absence of farmers contributing in the envisaged relevant product monitoring committee. Essentially, those who plant the crop and feel the economic consequences of the legislation first are excluded from the very body which is envisaged to oversee the implementation of the bill as it is, this tobacco control legislation. We feel it's vital that those producers be included there. They bring an additional dimension and insight into bodies such as that which have the oversight role, which is vital in this regard, especially the point that I made earlier about the transparency and the health of the sector as a whole. It needs to be regulated and properly represented. We have raised in our submissions a constitutional and procedural in particular challenges, which essentially boil down to two fundamental flaws. We do raise it respectfully that there's been a lack of meaningful public participation in the legislative making process. And I don't have to refer this committee to those provisions of the Constitution, sections 33 and 59, which require a rational, proportionate regulation developed through meaningful consultation. And in particular, new measures inserted into the bill that were not included in the initial drafts of the document that were scrutinized by ourselves, in which we and other organizations made significant and I think constructive contributions with respect to the bill at the initial drafts. This includes that point we made earlier about the establishment of a tobacco control committee, as well as those far-reaching powers of the minister which we feel might have a negative effect on the legitimate tobacco industry as it stands. These are not minor changes, Chair. They are substantive and potentially devastating to an entire sector in the value chain. We were not consulted on that, and we feel that that is a problem, and a significant problem with respect to the drafting of this legislation. Then, and this is a crucial element as well, I think a lot has been said about facts and figures about the effect of tobacco on health and what it costs the society and the economy as such through the negative consequences of smoking in particular. But there's never been a proper cost-benefit analysis done. So we know that from 2015, bills of regulation that need cabinet approval include the requirement for socioeconomic impact assessment, which needs to be signed off by the Department of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation in the presidency through that CS or socioeconomic impact assessment unit within that government department. And it bears, for purposes of the record, to restate the issue where we come from. The Department of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation said initially, when it issued its socioeconomic impact assessment certificate, that, and I quote, permission is granted to the Department of Health to proceed with the submission of the Tobacco Products and Electronic Delivery Systems Control Board and the SEIAS Final Impact Assessment Report be approved by Cabinet with the following condition to be considered. And then it says, conduct a comprehensive cost-benefit analysis. In the revised 2018 bill, the Department of Health acknowledged the missing information. It said that whilst the responses to the following section have been provided, comprehensive information will be furnished once the bill has been submitted to Parliament as per guidance to the Presidency. Page 47, it said that the costed plan will be available within 3 months from the date of tabling of the bill in Parliament. According to the memorandum of the bill, there are no cost implications for the state related to this bill. That cannot be. We obviously know that the duties, the tax implications of themselves have an implication with respect to the state to the bill. So without a thorough cost-benefit analysis, the statement simply cannot be substantiated. I'll leave it at that, Chair. I think we can elaborate on the absolute need for a socioeconomic impact assessment. But without that, I think decision makers, and particularly this portfolio committee, is not fully apprised of all the information that is required to make a meaningful decision as to how this bill will progress and how the concerns that we raise need to be considered in their entirety. So what do we propose? And I'm nearing the end of my presentation, Chair. We say as a first point that Parliament can greatly assist law enforcement agency by ratifying the World Health Organization's Framework Convention Tobacco Control Protocol to eliminate the illicit trade in tobacco products. And it bears mentioning again that South Africa was the first country to sign that protocol in 2013, although it's not been ratified as yet. Secondly, we propose that we postpone the plain packaging and retail display restrictions until illicit cigarette incident reduces to levels which law enforcement can effectively control. We believe that it's unnecessary and inappropriate to have these almost draconian powers imposed upon a sector without first addressing the illicit trade. And we think that the plain packaging requirements and retail display restrictions will actually compound the problem as opposed to alleviating that which we want to address together in sensible legislation. Thirdly, we want to ensure parliamentary oversight for any future regulation, including limits to intellectual property such as trademark or changes to point of sale rules. And then fourthly, we want to ensure farming and small business representatives hold seats on the envisaged relevant product monitoring committee. So the point comes down to tackling the illicit trade in tobacco products through a whole of government crackdown, through all three of those branches of legislative, executive, as well as the judiciary. In conclusion, Chair, we support rational, proportionate, evidence-based tobacco control regulation that is realistic, practical, enforceable, and grounded in national health, economic, and social objectives for the greater good of our country. Only once And until such time as illicit trade is under control, should sensible proportionate tobacco control measures be introduced, legislation which will protect both public health and farmer livelihoods. No new tobacco bill will have any chance to succeed until such time as the 70% illicit market has been dealt with and complies with current legislation. Chair, a lot can be said about this illegality, and it's not the point of Agri SA to talk about illegality. We want to talk the farming issue, obviously, but this issue goes to the heart of the challenges that our sector faces. But more than that, I think the challenges that we face as a society with respect to illegality and enforcement of laws. And I think in a nutshell, the summary of what I'd like to say is that the bill is severely restrictive and stops just short of a total ban, which we know does not work. Extreme measures will ensure that the illicit market grows even higher. The legal value chain will most likely have to close shop and consumption will increase. And this is the essential point. The system needs to be regulated properly to achieve an overall societal benefit, which is countervailed by this bill as we see it, which we feel will increase illegal use and consumption of cigarettes. The health agenda will be reduced. Of reduced consumption will never succeed, and the fiscus, importantly, will lose its tobacco tax base. The only winners will be the criminals. Chair, thank you for the opportunity. That's the conclusion of my presentation. I hand over to you for how to take this further, but that's the conclusion of my presentation.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Jansen, for sticking to your time allocated. This opportunity is now going to be given to Honorable. Let me just move away. Given to the members of this portfolio committee who would like to engage. I will recognize the hands as they come up on the platform, and we will please, Mr. Rabi, take the pen and paper of those who are assisting you so that we take all members one after the other, and then we take it from there. The first hand I've seen was that of Honorable Van Staden. Will be number one, Honorable Van Staden. And you are followed by Honorable Clark. Other members may shout if they are having gadgets that are not able to. That one will be Honorable Shabangu. If you are in a space where you can't raise a hand, okay, the fourth hand I've seen is that Honorable Motubatsi, who is struggling to change his gadget to look. He's always reaching somebody else's iPhone. And the fifth hand is that of Honorable Khumalo. Now I must scroll up here to see once more. Okay, honorable members, how do I scroll here now? Right. I'm having a gadget that can't show me well. So after Khumalo, may I recognize what other hands are there?
Ms. Sine, followed by Mr. Zungula, and lastly, Dr. Clark.
Sine, followed by Zungula, 7, Dr. Litlape. Right, honorable members, in that order, Honorable First Statement number 1, followed by Honorable Clark, one after the other. I won't come back to ask you to come. Third one is Honorable Shabangu, followed by Honorable Motubatsi. Fifth, Honorable Khumalo, followed by Honorable Sine. Number 7 is Honorable Zungula, followed by Dr. Letlape, in that order. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairperson. Good morning to all the colleagues and the presenters. Thank you for your presentation. I just have a few clarity-seeking questions. The first one is, do you believe that the existing tobacco legislation is sufficient, the current legislation? My second question is, are you willing to work with the Department of Health to amend or strengthen existing legislation where necessary? Do you think that this will address the South African market and its circumstances? Excuse me, and if not, why not? Does this bill have any benefits for public health, and do you think that this bill will be difficult to enforce, and if so, why? What impact will this new legislation have on the country's economy, the lives of farm workers and farmers? Are you satisfied with the recent NETLAC process that took place? And if not, why not? And my last question, Chair, do you believe that the illicit trade in tobacco will worsen under new legislation? And if so, to what extent? And regarding the offences and penalties under Clause 16 of this bill, do you think that South Africa has the necessary manpower to enforce this legislation? Thank you, Chairperson. That's all from me.
Thank you. Sorry.
Apology, Chairs. I was just wanting to confirm whether we go through all the questions and give us opportunity to respond, but I take it from the procedure and Ms. Clark's proceeding that we're first going to deal with all the questions and deal with them seriatim.
You might have missed that, Mr. Rabi. That's what I said. Take a pen and paper, write down as members ask questions. You come at the end of all these questions. Thanks.
My apologies, Chair.
Honorable Clark, come through.
Thank you, Chairperson. Good morning to the members and also to Mr. Rabi for the presentation. Member van Staden has addressed a couple of my questions, so I'm not going to repeat those. I would just like to know from you if you had to amend or remove certain clauses from this existing bill, which would they be? And would, in terms of your presentation on page 6, the proposals you made, would you like to see those proposals factored within the bill? Have you approached the department with your concerns, and what has been the responses? What is your experience with law enforcement policing of illicit trade? And could you tell me what happened to the 157 farmers who gave up tobacco farming? If you know of that, and give us feedback on that. And I'm extremely concerned about the CS report. That if I could just get clarity, you say that the Department of DPME have not signed off the CS report at the moment, because one would think that report would go hand in hand with the NEDLAC report. And could you also elaborate what do you see as dealing with harm reduction and the fact that electronic products are basically being regulated the same way as cigarettes? Also, does much of the illicit trading not also come from legit companies doing dodgy businesses? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for this presentation that has been presented to us. And greetings to all the members in the platform. I've got clarity-seeking questions. The presentation generally emphasizes more on the support of the tobacco business industry, and which, if you look at it, is more of the economic growth and development. And the presenter also mentioned the loss that has happened in the farming industry. But there was a research that shows that about 40,000 South Africans die annually as a result of the products from these industries. And that amounts to 42 billion loss to the economy. As much as the proposed bill is not against the farming industry, but I want to know that would you be interested in sustaining an industry that half the lifetime users of the end product will die using the product? And why would you be interested in sustaining such industries? Furthermore, you express interest in throughout, if I look at your presentation, interest in sustaining the industry and farming, which the bill is not banning, like I've said. But what is your take on the interest expressed by one of the tobacco industry to end the smoking using the slogan "Unsmoke South Africa" and to replace tobacco product with non-tobacco nicotine product? What is your take with regard to that slogan from this expressed by this other tobacco industry? You told us that the estimated illicit market is between 60 and 70%. Maybe to have a better understanding of that illicit trading, which is between 60 and 70, we know that it's not illicit because it comes from one angle of the country. But if you can maybe explain to us how much of this illicit cigarette comes from South Africa, South African manufacturers, and how much from outside South Africa, because there is illicit cigarette that is manufactured using the tobacco from the farms. You also suggest that the bill in its current form will exacerbate illicit trading. One of the honorable members asked a question, but if the bill, the proposed bill, it's banning smoking in the public places. It does not specify the type of tobacco or product. It's 100% non-smoking in the public places. So if you say the bill in its current form will exacerbate illicit trading, how? Because the proposal is that there must be 100% non-smoking in the public places. Can you please explain this? How is it going to worsen illicit trading? When it comes to plain packaging, and the presenter suggests that plain packaging should be on hold until there is control of illicit trading. I don't know how the proposed bill will then, if we say not plain packaging, because what is proposed in the bill is it's aiming at reducing induction, which in effect, if you look at the marketing and the sales, these attracting colors were made to attract people from starting smoking. And everywhere, even if you go past the tops next to Spar, the colors and the display, they can lead to induction. So this bill is aimed at preventing or reducing induction of mainly for people that haven't started smoking. So if the packaging is still going to be colorful, we will be not doing justice into the proposed bill that we are aiming at reducing induction to smoking. Chair, let me pause there and thank you for the opportunity.
No, thanks very much, Chair. I think I'm the one who's following. And thanks for the presentation. Greetings to members of the Portfolio Committee. One, I heard you in your presentation speaking to the 49% of the loss. Hello, can I continue?
Yeah, Honorable Mutubas, I was just checking who is also talking with you. I can't see. Please, honorable members, if you are not given a space or any of the people in the platform, mute your microphone. It disturbs when one is on the platform. Continue, Honorable Mutubas.
No, thanks very much, Chair. I was trying to establish of the 49% that was lost. I want to believe that 51% is remaining in the market. Can you break it down? How many of the African farmers that are in the trade currently that are farming, and of the 49, how many of them were lost due to the loss that we experience in the industry? Secondly, if you can help me here, what does the bill have to do with illicit trading? And what is your definition of illicit trading? I want to take it for granted that by a legitimate business person or a legitimate trader, you're talking about a person who's registered, who has got a company with CPIC, and who has followed all the processes. Now, tell me, if a person is selling an old woman who's sitting next to the mall or at the taxi rank, because that's where most of our people are relegated to, would you define that person or categorize that particular person as an illicit trader? And that's what you are talking about when you say this bill, if and like I said, you must help me, because as far as I'm concerned, this bill has got nothing to do with dealing with illicit traders. That's another ball game. But we are just dealing with the tobacco itself and how society must be protected. Now, would you define that particular person who is sitting there as an illicit trader because he does not have what you define as a legitimate business person, as someone who's not registered? And you said you were not consulted. How were you expecting to be consulted? And I'm raising this question because I take it for granted that business is part of NetLec. If there are any loopholes that are there in respect of the consultation process within the business industry in representing you at NetLeg, can you share with us what are your frustrations? Perhaps maybe we can moving forward. We can then, when we engage with NetLeg, we can be able to raise this particular question. Yeah. So those were the few questions that I had, Chair. Thank you very much.
Next is Honorable Khumalo.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Greetings to all members of the committee and everyone that is in the platform. Thank you once more, Chair, for the opportunity. Chairperson, I'll be very short, but I want just to check with the presenter here, what does he mean when he said the bill is severely restrictive, when the bill is not banning the production or sale? What does he mean when he said the bill is severely restrictive? And also, Chair, in his conclusion slide, he indicated that 70% of the market is illicit. Can I check, Chair, where does this information come from, that the 70% illicit trade market is illicit? Those will be my question, Chair. Thank you.
I think it's Honorable Zungula. After this, yeah. Honorable Sinne, yeah.
It's me, Chair. And greetings to board members and everyone in the platform. Chair, I have only 2 questions. And let me also appreciate and welcome the presentation by the presenter. On slide 7, the presenter indicated that the socio-economic impact assessment was not done on the version of the bill, which is currently under discussion. My question, Chair, is that are you implying that the Cabinet considered the bill with no submission from the socio-economic impact assessment because this is required by the law? And my other question is that would Agri SA support stricter regulations on tobacco advertising, packaging, and sales accompanied by economic support for farmers? On slide 8, the presenter indicated or suggested that the restriction on advertisement constitute a very severe restriction on the free market and severely limits consumers' ability to make informed product choices. So, are you aware that the Supreme Court of Appeal has ruled as far back as 2012 that this limitation on rights was justified following a legal challenge instituted by the tobacco industry?
Is Honorable Sine done? Yes.
I'm done, Chair.
Okay.
Was I
Honorable,
not audible?
you paused as if you were just drinking water. Honorable Zungula, come through.
Thank you, Chair. Greetings to the committee and the staff, the guests that have been invited to present today. My question, Chair, is in relation to illicit trading. Can Agri SA maybe state that, or maybe give us a view on the assertion that illicit trade is also coming from the industry? Meaning the industry is the one that facilitates and provides tobacco in the illicit market. What do they have to say with that maybe assertion or allegation? Because if 70% of the tobacco trade is illicit, there's some argument from some corners to say, but that 70% is still coming from the very same industry, because they're trying to evade paying taxes and complying with some of the laws. And then the second question, it is in relation again to the issue of illicit trade by asking from their side as Agri SA, what do you think could be done to manage the issue of illicit trade, meaning oversight over now the industry? I get what SARS is legislated to do, but I think let's also focus on the industry, because Agri SA, in my understanding, is representing players in the industry. So from your side as the industry, aside from what SARS would do, what can you do, or what do you propose to be done to address the issue of illicit trade? Because it is a troublesome issue. Whilst we can say that the bill is intended to reduce the impact of smoking on the public health care system, but if we do not address the issue of the illicit trade, when people go to hospital for whatever illnesses they get from smoking, there will never be questioned whether they were smoking illicit or from well-regulated sectors. So from your side as Agri SA, what do you think could be the solution, focusing on the industry and not just pushing the issue to SARS? Thank you.
Honorable Totally Tape.
Thank you, Chair. My questions would be, firstly, in terms of what is happening globally, where in other jurisdictions alternatives to combustible cigarettes are being considered, and the nicotine in the various products is largely sourced from the tobacco leaf. What is happening around farmers seeking markets where there's progressive thinking, where smokers are seen as human and are assisted to reduce the number of deaths amongst adult smokers. Our bill seems to condemn adult smokers to death and is concentrating solely on issues of youth uptake, which are important, but the deaths don't come from the youth. So are there any things that our agricultural sector is looking at progressive markets where their products could be used into less harmful source of nicotine? The second question relating to that is, would there be any assistance to farmers if there was job creation in the new nicotine market in this country, so that you could then be providing the raw materials to alternative nicotine consumption? Thirdly, there's the question about the combating illicit trade from the WHO. You've alluded to it, but can you clearly articulate where South Africa is in relation to that? Because as we saw during the times of COVID, the sales where we could extract tax went down, but consumption of tobacco didn't go down. And you saw the switch to illicit. What is it that can be done in this country to enhance dealing with that? Because my fear is that with some of what is being proposed, the industry won't die, it'll just be driven into the wrong hands. And for me, the issue is not just about illicit trade. It's about the fact that as we went on road shows, the people said, "What are you smoking, parliamentarians? Our problems is main drug use, where tobacco that is now not from proper sources is mixed with other drugs. And we have an even greater problem amongst the youth, where they are addicted to more harmful, more addictive drugs, with illicit cigarettes as an entry, where they are tainted cigarettes that get into the market." I mean, just to give you an example, in the US, when they had what they called EVALI, which was a lung disease associated with vaping, they initially thought it was e-cigarettes, but eventually they found that it was laced cannabis vaping, which was laced with a substance that increases the yield, but that is toxic. That element of now being able to expose our community to even more harmful drugs. Are we enabling that, like we saw during COVID? And what is our state of readiness, even in terms of policing what is being suggested, increasing the age limit? I mean, we have 12-year-olds that smoke. What can we do also to ensure that there's enforcement of current regulations? Is there any suggestions from the tobacco growers? And also, lastly, just to comment about what is your uptake on new methodologies and protecting your workers from exposure to tobacco? What is being done in terms of improvements for protection of workers in tobacco growing? Thank you, Chair.
I note another last hand, Honorable Kgeko. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Good morning to you, the members of Parliament, our guests that have made a presentation, and also the department. viewers also. Chair, I just want to appreciate what has been presented by Agri SA to this portfolio committee. It means we've done enough in trying to make public awareness about this bill. Now that they are here, it means there has been consultation. I think, Chair, let me put it this way to say the issue of illicit trading getting termed to be the highest at 60 to 70% is talked about more in their presentation, whilst it's not the main item in the bill. We are not saying we encourage, but it is not, the bill is not about the illicit trading. Also, Chair, I would like to sensitize the delegation about the pictures that they display during presentations. To me, it means it's only the Black people that are highly affected by the job losses. Other populations are not. I am a bit worried about that picture that only displayed Black people when they were talking about job losses. It talks a lot, Chairperson. They need to be careful when they are showing some of the slides. I think, Chair, when they see the risks, when we introduce this bill, their risks may not be our risk as people in the portfolio committee or as observed by myself, because I am looking at the bill on a health perspective. They are looking at the bill on a business perspective and also boosting the economy. I am not saying I am not worried about the economy, but our mandate is to protect public health. That's why we are introducing the bill. Also, Chair, in the presentation, it is highlighted that the bill may not meet the constitutional requirement. I would like to ask, where do they base that? If it's their view, if they are concluding to say we have not done enough on public participation, how do they like us to do it? How far must we go as the portfolio committee? Because to me, we have done enough. We've gone to all the provinces. Now we are entertaining them. They are in front of us. We have started. We are continuing as the portfolio committee. Also, on the mention of a monitoring committee, they suggest that the powers and functions must be limited. Can the presenters come out to say why are they worried about the powers and functions of that monitoring committee, which I think it will be doing a very important job. And also, my worry goes to where they mentioned this high percentage on illicit trading. I become so worried, Chair. We don't have the statistics in front of us, but they have. But what they are saying now is not our real concern when the bill is introduced. I think, Chair, I must stop there, but to ask them if they doubt they doubt our capacity and also the capacity of the department to monitor and also the capacity of the portfolio committee to do oversight. Just to highlight to us what areas are they basing their thinking to. I would like just to get that. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, honorable members. Mr. Rabi, if I may just add some from my side, we would have to, together with you and the department, go and just validate the statement that you made with regards to the Department of Monitoring and Evaluation from the presidency, the absence of some information that you think should and must be provided to us and to yourself. We are not really sure of whether that is still lacking behind. Of course, give you credit on some of the things that is work in progress. I think the Department of Health has put some measures to work with the University of Cape Town on another proposal that we have put in place there. And I think those issues then needs to be followed up. Honorable members, we have a varied views, or maybe emphasizing most all of us have talked about illicit cigarette or illicit trade. And you probably recall that this matter is not coming up for the first time here. It has been coming in our public hearings where we have been. I would share with you some of the things that also is a concern. Ourselves as legislators with this bill are probably saying, let's cross over this road, let's cross over this river. We think there's a better life on the other side of this river. But look, that the bridge is not working well is probably not so much of our concern. Just cross over, whether you go over the back of the crocodile or something. So I would, somebody can crudely put it that way to say it's just not going to be possible to conclude this without touching strongly on that part. And that's why I think some of the members were saying, what can they then do also to contribute? I think also a stance that says, look, I want this bill to become an act, come what may, I don't have anything to do myself with the illicit, is not going to be realistic. So, also getting into what other members have just said, Mr. Rabi, how many of the growers are deliberately selling their tobacco to legitimate this and that company that is producing, vis-a-vis some that are growing and milling it or preparing it for illicit within the country? Because there may be also people are double dipping. I think that has come up from to say, look, because they are regulating us this side, let's also continue selling in a regulatory way. But here, unregulated and illicit, let's continue with that. Because one has been worried to say, you will not support a statement that says illicit trading is coming in from where border management authorities must also act on, is only coming in from outside the country. Some of the people who are tobacco growers in the country are feeding into the illicit. Now, what do we do with that part? Because it is a legitimate tobacco grower who is feeding two streams. Is feeding into the legitimate processes which we are trying to look to regulate, but is also have no problem to actually feed into this illicit in such a way that one honorable member said, what do we do then to really curb on this illicit trading? But it can't be just all of us wondering and not knowing where is it. Until, and we talk to this strongly, was illicit trading and illicit tobacco is not only coming in from outside the borders of our country. Some of it comes from within. And therefore it's a duty of all of those, especially yourselves who are actually growing the tobacco. At that part, do you know of any country or countries who have had improved regulations on tobacco and have then noticed that there will be a decrease in terms of their plantations and have moved away to start other products? Because it will probably not be also realistic to say for as long as we live, there will not be improvements in regulations of tobacco and therefore not necessarily banning completely, but shrinking the tobacco industry to such an extent that we need to diversify, because there may as well be a day when there's not so much of this that is going to come through. I like the last part to say, maybe because you are dealing with what is your main focus, you probably have not had much to deal with the issues of public health, and yet this bill has something to do with public health. To quantify, you probably don't have that space. The quantification that must be done with what gets injected into the GDP of our country through tobacco industry and what gets deducted through dealing with the consequences of tobacco, which is something that we probably need to also interrogate. That data may not be available to you, and maybe it's not something that we are interested in, but there are those concerns too, that the bill is a public health, has something to do with the public health, and therefore we'll look into that. At the end of the day, we would want to have less and less harm to the citizens. Do support us, or then it is correct what Honorable Xhego was saying. Let us not display a tobacco industry or tobacco growers as just going to disadvantage 100 workers, who sometimes, most of them are casual workers. They come in whenever there's this and that. They're not permanent. There are very big people there who actually benefit from this. So that photo was just not an accurate display of what is happening in the industry. About 100 of those combined and less than one big director of this industry in the space. So let us be truthful in presenting what is there within the industry. Can you assist us with the responses? Thank you.
The Chair and honourable members, thank you very much for your questions. They display a keen interest in our position on this, and from my personal point of view, also highly enlightening to see the other dimensions raised by your questions. There are a number of questions, Chair, and I think that they might take us much longer than I think what the allocated time was provided, but I'm going to do my best to go through them as much as possible. I'm starting with your questions. You've essentially asked 8 questions, the first being whether we feel that the current policy suffices for the regulation of the sector and legislative landscape. I presume if I've shorthanded that a bit too much for my own purposes. Just on first principles, Chair, we feel that good legislation is necessary to avoid harmful consequences that might not be foreseen in terms of the present bill. Our emphasis is fixing what is wrong before we progress to further statutory requirements, of which the consequences have not been fully explored. So do we feel that the existing legislation suffices and policy suffices with respect to regulation of tobacco control? Chair, I do think that there's an enormous body of evidence suggesting and supporting the legal production, distribution of tobacco products in South Africa. We understand that this is a problem societal-wise as far as our health point, and it's a point that came through in a number of the questions. But we're not only seeing 2 wrongs not making a right, we're seeing 2 wrongs making multiple wrongs and creating a situation where the illegality of a tobacco industry, those unlawful growers, producers, and that illegal value chain is actually being supported to the degree that it is causing much more harm than what we have in terms of our existing legislation and the provisions in which the sector is regulated. I want to emphasize that the tobacco industry is highly regulated, enormously regulated. It is well supported by industry bodies and major commercial enterprises in the formal sector that have a keen and deep understanding of what the tobacco industry entails from a commercial, from an agricultural, from a health point of view. And this was part of the submission as well, is that I don't think that the sector's voice has been fully heard, and we don't think that the legislature has been properly informed through the necessary studies and the necessary inputs that come that are required for purposes of getting to the bill to where to the stage where it is now. On the specific question as to whether Agri SA is willing to work with the Department of Health, yes, naturally. We want to work with all organs of state to achieve an outcome. We don't have a vested interest in smoking. We have a vested interest in a constructively regulated, purposeful, evidence-based bill being the outcome of this process, which serves the process of health, obviously, firstly, which is this portfolio committee's ambit, but also doesn't create that unforeseen consequence whereby we're creating and supporting illegality through, amongst other things, a regulation which is not appropriate to achieve the objective which we all want to see achieved. I think you raised a question about us addressing the South African markets and the circumstances. I have with me Mr. Francois van der Merwe, who represents farm tobacco growers in South Africa through various initiatives, which I'm going to hand over to him on the question now. But first, Mr. van Staan, perhaps I'll interrupt myself. Just some of the questions that I can first dispense with in my little bit of contributing to the discussion and the engagement. You raised the further question as to the benefits of what the legislation or the bill tries to do and what the enforcement requirements are, and where the discrepancy or the lack of the shortcomings of the bill actually come into play. Again, I think the point was made sufficiently. I believe that it doesn't help that we have legislation that does essentially two things: far more statutory obligation, far more decision-making opportunities, far more difficult to comply with legislation, which leads to people never being able to be legally compliant, and also creates this opportunity for further illegality. I think the danger of over-regulation in South Africa is exactly that. Every decision-making opportunity in terms of legislation is an opportunity for abuse. And I hesitate to use the view corruption, but essentially we have run the risk of through over-regulation, creating opportunities for corruption, further illegality taking place, and then also the situation whereby it simply becomes impossible for anybody to be legally compliant. And that feeds into a system where you have legislation and nobody doubts the intention of ultimately ensuring the health of the citizens of South Africa. But we must be very careful with particularly commodities such as tobacco to not create further and more significant problems. Now, these are large economic problems and issues that are discussed, and from an agricultural organization, that is, we certainly have a keen interest in it, but our issue is mainly with what this will do to the primary producers of tobacco in South Africa. And we'll debate that. We'll go into that a little bit further, because I think this question has been raised in a number of the questions by the honourable members. The impact on the economy, we've spoken about that again, and I'm not going to go into that in too much detail, but obviously we know that tobacco sales are a major component and almost a feature of our national budget, with anticipated almost every year and a realization of anticipated revenue being collected from announcements by the Treasury as far as duties on tobacco, as well as the VAT increases on that as well. So it has a significant impact on the economy. In fact, that is one of the main features of the budget annually, as to what those sin tax will actually amount to and what the revenue is that's going to be recollected by, or potentially collected in a legally and properly regulated environment for the national fiscus. So it has a significant impact on the economy, but that impact is much broader than simply raising revenue. It includes, which is the aim of this bill, ensuring health benefits or promoting health benefits, in mitigating the adverse consequences of cigarette smoking and South African tobacco use altogether. It affects the entire value chain. It impacts an entire legislative and governance function within state, where if we can't properly enforce and can't properly draft the legislation, we're actually creating a system which undermines the entire legal process and governance of not only the tobacco sector, but many others in that regard too. We need to get it right. Otherwise, we're throwing a lot away in the process, not only for the primary producers and the value chain within tobacco as such, but a whole governance structure and support structure, which actually becomes redundant if we can't have legislation is actually properly enforceable and well thought about. Our participation, I think, touching on the next question, in the NEDLAC process. It's fine to have a NEDLAC process, but then we also need to understand that we're being heard. The submissions that are made through the NEDLAC process, if they simply don't get heard in the final versions of the legislation, the bill in this case, which we see, what's the point? I think our arguments, and I think this portfolio committee is well aware of those sound rational arguments, but if they're raised in NEDLAC and they're not heard properly, we absolutely appreciate the opportunity to engage with the portfolio committee now. But this is a broader process, of engagement, not only through NEDLAC, but also with stakeholders altogether, and then ultimately in this portfolio committee. And we thank you for that again. I think we've spoken a lot about illicit trade, and a lot's been written about the effect of illicit trade altogether. The net result ultimately, and I think the main point for this committee's purposes, is that illegality leads to an increase in smoking through illegality. The main control mechanisms through our legislation governing tobacco use, manufacture, and oversight roles from a Department of Health and a Minister of Health is that needs to be a properly, fully enforceable piece of legislation. Otherwise, we're not going to achieve the objectives of the legislation. In fact, we're going to make the problem worse. So that essentially is what we're pushing, and what we see is not only a loss of production capacity and production jobs, obviously, and the farmers that do farm with this commodity, but we see that the problem is actually being increased by cheaper products flooding the market and actually leading to an increased consumption of cigarettes, use of cigarettes, but also cigarettes that are simply not regulated. As I said, the point is that you need a very regulated, highly regulated sector to be able to avoid those very harmful consequences of stuff that you simply don't know is being inhaled by those people that do choose to smoke in South Africa. On that, and I do digress a little bit on this, and apologies for the pun, but banning and avoiding overnight tobacco use and cigarette smoke overnight is essentially, and this is the pun, a pipe dream. It doesn't happen. We need to be responsible as far as our governance is concerned, and together with that, obviously, the legislative competence that portfolio committee is responsible for. So those effects are numerous. And again, if Mr. Van der Merwe is sitting next to me wants to come in on that, I'll allow him the opportunity to do so. But I think the point, in the principal point that I make is clear. Then you asked Member van Staden, Honourable Member van Staden, do we have the manpower to enforce? I don't think that is the right question. It needs to be enforced. There's simply no choice. If we allow an excuse as to the inavailability of manpower to enforce legislation on this particular topic, that goes for exactly the same of any instance of potential criminality in South Africa. We need to enforce it. And I think the arguments as far as the economic implications, the health implications, those stack up against the absolute requirement and necessity to create those mechanisms to enforce. We don't need additional legislation which is going to compound the obligations for enforcement agents and make it harder for them to enforce this legislation. We need better, smarter legislation, which I don't think this bill is going to achieve. I hope, Mr. Honourable Member van Staden, I hope I've addressed most of your questions properly. If I do, I'm looking at my colleague on the left to see whether I've gone through that as much as possible. Honourable Member Clark, if we could amend some of the clauses, what would we do? I think those particular clauses that we did refer to in the presentation, as far as the requirements for, amongst others, the marketing, advertising, blank packaging, the requirements to be included in committees. Those I think have been thoroughly, and I'm not going to repeat them again, but they've been thoroughly included in our presentation as well as our submissions that are previously referred to. So there are certainly clauses that need to be amended in this, if not a wholesale rethink of what this bill actually is going to be doing, and together with the other comments that I made about the socio-economic impact assessment and the necessary requirements as far as that is concerned. I think we've spoken about the proposals and factors. I think it's the note that I made here, if I'm not missing it from Honourable Member Clark on the second point. I
didn't talk about the farmers.
Yes,
What happened to the farmers?
Yes, on that particular question, yes, the farmer question was one. The issue on the socioeconomic impact assessment, but to our knowledge, we haven't seen it. We haven't seen a socioeconomic impact assessment, and this is a question that has been raised a number of times as to the constitutionality and the legality of this bill at this process. It's not the requirement for socioeconomic impact assessment, which is the constitutional issue, the legality issue. It's the question as to whether the legislature and decision makers on this bill have been fully apprised of all relevant information to be able to be said to have properly applied their minds in drafting this legislation. And that relates to the right to just administrative action, access to information together with that, which is constitutionally enshrined. And this is the issue that we have with substantive information not having been canvassed and circulated upon, which we might have had the opportunity to make in-depth submissions that leads to this issue of constitutionality and legality altogether. But Chairperson, through you as well, I think there was a question raised about confirmation as to what the status of that CS or that socioeconomic impact assessment actually where it stands and what happened to it. Then I think Honourable Clark, you've also Honourable Member Clark, you've also asked the question about what is harm reduction? What do we regard as harm reduction? Again, the question is an important question, in particular from a health point of view. What we say is, if you want to really address the harm, you need to properly legislate. The ability to enforce, the ability and the need, absolute need before a person moves into new legislation to be properly regulating, governing, stamping out illegal use. We'll get to that a little bit later in some of the other questions too. This is a prerequisite before we embark on a statutory process, which has significant implications, obviously. We need to address the underlying problems to be able to achieve the overall objective of increasing and making sure that the harmful consequences of those people that do choose to smoke tobacco products or use tobacco products is actually addressed. We absolutely make sure that that what is in place is properly enforced and that we don't carry on with a system that is not working and is in fact allowing for additional illegality to take place. Mr. Flamabo, I don't know if you wanted to come in on those particular questions on the farms.
Thank you, Mr. Robbie. Thank you, Honourable Chair. I represent the tobacco farmers in South Africa. They're all affiliated with Agri SA, and that's the role that I play here. Chair, some relevant questions around the farmers. I'm in a position to paint a picture for the committee about the farmers. And the farmers ask one question, and Chair, you've asked some very relevant questions at the end, right at the end of the question session. And thank you for asking that, Chair, because it's a very relevant question. Our farmers in South Africa are all within the formal tobacco sector, tobacco value chain net. In other words, they all on record, they all have contracts, they all contracted to legitimate companies. We don't, if I can put it this way, we don't have rogue farmers producing for this and that and for the other thing. And that I can prove to you, Chair, but that is the factual situation. And the farmers have one question. Mr. Rabi mentioned that from pre-COVID to now, our tobacco production has dropped by 50%, 40 to 50%. Now that's massive in a space of 5 years. Why? Because illicit trade has eaten their market away. That's the bottom line. That's the simple answer, and that's the reality. And our farmers have this very honest question to our government, and they ask, why has government allowed our market to be eaten away by illicit trade. And that's it, because consumption hasn't gone down. Our farmers are well informed. They understand they produce a product that is harmful to health, and they fully support regulatory measures to reduce the consumption of smoking. But the market hasn't declined, Chair. That's the question. So the farmers say, okay, but if the market is actually on the increase, why are we selling less and less and less and less of our leaf? And that is the heartbreaking question from farmers who farm in rural areas. And the question about where did the 150 farmers go is a very relevant question. Pre-COVID, we had about 200 commercial farmers, tobacco farmers. We now sit with 136. Pre-COVID, we had 150 new emerging black farmers who came from the industry, investing in new black farmers, starting on a small scale to eventually graduate them to become commercial farmers in partnership with government. Government didn't play their role, because from government we need infrastructure funding, we need production finances. But as the sector, 150 black farmers were trained up from within the industry. Of those 150, 10 are left. The other 140, Honourable Clerk, to answer your question, has either gone to grants or is growing a little bit of this and that to stay alive. With tobacco, they had a fixed market, a stable market, a good price, and they made a living. And the idea was to eventually graduate them to become commercial farmers and become real contributors to the economy. And as some of the black farmers will tell you, now they have to go back to grants. Why? Because their market has been stolen away. So that's what happened to the farmers. The commercial farmers being commercial, many of them have scaled down on their leaf, but others are doing other crops, but they still have their tobacco infrastructure, because they believe if illicit is tackled and brought down, then legal farmers can come back into and produce more legal leaf. And Chair, to your question, there are no South African produced tobacco leaf that goes into illicit manufacturing, because they are all on record. We grow two types of tobacco in South Africa. The one is flue-cured tobacco that is used in the making of cigarettes, and 100% of that leaf is sold locally to a company called BAT, and Universal is also a buyer, and all of that is well controlled within the legal industry. The other part of tobacco production in South Africa is what we call dark air-cured tobacco, which is used for the making of pipe tobacco. And that is all also contracted under a company called Universal Leaf. Universal will also make a presentation to this company. So the leaf in South Africa is well controlled, it's on record, it does not find its way into illicit. I'm not saying there's one or two farmers on the air-cured side, because air-cured has a street value from the farm. Flue-cured tobacco does not have a street value. It's got to go through a processing plant. So you can't sell cigarette tobacco from a farm. It's not ready for that. It's got to go through processes. So, and to Mr. van Staden's question is, what will the impact of this bill be on farmers? Anything that will exacerbate the illicit trade situation will impact on local farmers. In other words, the illegal market will grow. That means our local farmers who supply the legal market will just become smaller and smaller and smaller. And maybe later I can also ask on why do we think the current bill will exacerbate illicit trade.
Thank you, Mr. Fanaba. I'm going to carry on with the questions as I've noted them. Shabali, you had a question about the sector, and particularly I presume the industry's position on sustaining an industry where ultimately the users die. And that is a very pertinent, hard question, obviously, to answer. The answer in that is not to harm the farmer, obviously, to that. I think free will is still something that we do have in South Africa to the degree where people choose to use cigarettes. And we're not blind to the realities of those users of cigarettes and the circumstances in which they find themselves sometimes. But that is not a question on an agricultural point of view, which I think we're fully alive to, I suppose, and maybe there is room for us to consider that. But this is essentially the point whether you have a moral obligation with respect to the production of a commodity. And a person can go into that in a lot of detail. There are lots of commodities which the people have a particular view on, including red meat, for instance. That is not the sector's role. We want to ensure that the agricultural sector is viable, vibrant, properly regulated, properly enforced to achieve those objectives. So there's a question about education, the question of implicit question as to social upliftment. There's almost an implicit accusation towards producers of commodities that are potentially harmful to users thereof. And our view on that is that as long as there's a market, those situations will still exist. And it's up to a consumer to exercise his or her free will, and hopefully through properly being informed as to what the risks are there. Our sector is interested in legal production, fully legal, and properly legislated and enforced regulation of commodities and the use thereof. And I'll leave it at that, Chair. I think the question, I think that to the extent that I'm able to do so, I think I've tried to answer that. What is our take on the companies that say smoke-free South Africa? I think that similarly relates to the response that I've given to your question before. What is our take? Obviously, we want a healthier society. We want our children to not be harmed by the consequences of smoking. But through that, and this is the emphasis of our presentation, this needs to be properly regulated, properly enforced, because the unforeseen consequences stretch further than obviously only health. But we're creating a bigger problem by not properly legislating a sector which, as I've said before, it's very highly regulated. Technical sometimes has a major social component and dimension to it, as well as economic. And that is the best answer I think I can give at this stage, unless it's one of my roles to amplify that or add anything to that. Honourable Member Shibanga, you've asked the question about the 60 to 70% of illicit trade and how much of this is from South Africa. I think Mr. Flammer has sufficiently answered that, but I think we want to come in on this as well.
I can just give some more detail, honourable members, because it's important. This is not figures that are thumb-sucked, and it's important that we understand the lay of the land. Consumer research shows that South African consumption is around 35 to 37 billion cigarettes a year. And in the last financial year, only 13 billion of those were tax paid, in other words, collected by SARS. That leaves you a balance of 24 billion out of 37. That gives you around 65%. There's other research using other methodologies. Even the University of Cape Town research unit says that illicit is in the upper 50s into 60. Oxford Economics says it's 63, 65. So, Chair, the reality is it doesn't matter whether illicit trade is 58 or whether it's 70. The fact is it's massive. And the greatest impact of illicit is that it stimulates consumption. It's unregulated. It is just flooding the market with cheap illegal cigarettes. And let me just say this, Chair, it's not only duties on cigarettes that make them illicit. And that's why the farmers also have a concern around the new bill. Because the current act, the question has been asked, is the current act sufficient? And we believe, yes, the current act is efficient. Just start by enforcing it. The current act has things, taxes make cigarettes illicit. That's true. But for example, we have reported how many cases of incorrect tar and nicotine readings on cigarettes, which is the Department of Health legislation, which they simply enforce. They can't even test it. So how can you have legislation you can't even test it or enforce it? There's a specific type of cigarette paper which falls under the Department of Health's jurisdiction, which is circumvented by the illicit operating because they use cheap, unregulated paper. We've reported to the department, there's no enforcement on that. Online sales of cigarettes, Chair, is against the law. It's not enforced. Cigarettes may not be sold to under 18s. It's in the current act. It's not enforced. So there are only 7 or 8 powerful things in the current act which are not even enforced by the department. I'm not talking about the taxes. That's a SARS jurisdiction. We would like to see more involvement of the DOH on that because it's their agenda that goes out the window if cheap cigarettes flood the market. But even those 4 or 5 examples that I mentioned now fast forward to the new bill, I mentioned to you 4 or 5. The new bill has about 40 plus new requirements that will come into. So if we can't enforce 5 or 6 in the current act, how on earth would you enforce 40 plus new requirements? It's a clear picture that it is not possible to enforce the draconian and the restrictive measures in the new bill. That will give more opportunity to illicit traders they want this bill because they know there's no enforcement and they will just become a bigger player in the market. So more cheap products, non-compliant products in the market, less production for the farmers, less jobs, less farmers, less taxes, and the health agenda is even more compromised. Thank you, Mr. Rob.
No. Don't go past this question. Members have asked, are you saying that 65% is coming outside the borders of our country? There's no illicit tobacco that is manufactured, grown in our country. Please be explicit on this one.
Absolutely, Chair. Of the 24 billion illegal cigarettes that is in the market, around 20 billion of that is manufactured locally in South Africa. That means 80% at least of all illicit cigarettes in South Africa are manufactured in South Africa. But those manufacturers do not buy their leaf from South African farmers. Their leaf comes mostly from Zimbabwe. And that's not where the transgression lies. The transgression lies in a cigarette manufacturer must pay his excise to SARS the moment his products leave the factory. So the problem is not bringing leaf from Zimbabwe. That's all fair and well. The problem is local manufacturers not declaring all their production to SARS and therefore will manufacture 1,000 cases. Today, they have to report 24 hourly to SARS and they will declare 100 cases, for example. 900 cases goes out the back door. They don't pay the tax and those products go into the market for cheap. So to be explicit, Chair, of around 24 billion illegal cigarettes in this country, 20 billion are manufactured in South Africa by local manufacturers registered and licensed by SARS.
Thank you, Mr. Fulham-Abbe. I'm going to go through some of the questions again as much as fast as I can. And Chair, I'm obviously your hands as far as the time for...
Mr. Rabi, come closer to the mic, please.
Yes,
Or
Chair,
raise the volume.
better. Chair, I think the last question by Honourable Member Shabangu was about the ban of, and the intention of this bill to ban smoking in public places and how will it worsen illegal smoking, and then also the question that tied to that with plain packaging. Chair, again, whether a person smokes or legislation provides for banning smoking in public places or not, that is not the issue. It's about more smokers wherever they might find themselves, whether it's in a public place or whether it's in their private home or the confines of their homes. This is where the issue lies, as opposed to that. We understand and we also fully appreciate and know that there's strict requirements and enhanced requirements with respect to bans of smoking in public places already. This is not the issue. Adding a further layer of adding that serves very little, I think, in terms of the context of what this bill is trying to achieve with respect. And to a similar degree, the question about plain packaging also applies. We've made that practical submission about plain packaging, making it much more difficult to distinguish between a legally produced cigarette as opposed to illegally produced cigarette. And that to the extent that is an important consideration, I think we feel that you need to consider that as well in the drafting of this legislation to not, try to have a good intention, but not having an effect in terms of what it is that you're ultimately trying to achieve. Chair, I hope, and Honourable Member Shabangu, I think that dispenses your questions. I'm turning to the questions of Honourable Member Matubatse. You asked a very pertinent question about how many African farming enterprises remain. I think Mr. Fulham-Abbe made that point very clearly with respect to the legislation that provides for the sale, production of cigarettes and how that is very well regulated as it is. So the question as to how many African farmers remain in this sector, and I think you might want to expand a little bit about that, but it is a sector that is well represented by African or black farmers in South Africa, wanting to and having produced tobacco leaf in South Africa as well. The issue is, again, how do they sell their product to manufacturers that are legally producing cigarettes? I don't know if you wanted to come in here, Mr. I think that point I've made. You also asked a question on what the effect of the bill would be with respect to illegal illicit trading, and what is an illicit trader. That is a sensitive question, Chair, and I understand and appreciate the sensitivity with which you raised the question. We're not talking about people that are selling cigarettes illegally. We're talking about illegal cigarettes. And those people having to sell those cigarettes because there's a market, because it's a simply cheap option as opposed to what is in the legal market. We're not focusing on that person who's struggling to survive and making a living by selling cigarettes. We're trying to make sure that this situation is legislated as positively as possible to ensure that the consequences of harmful tobacco product use, which is not regulated and which has significant health risks, by virtue of the way that it's manufactured, actually plays into the society altogether. You also asked Honourable Member Matubatse about how we were not consulted. And we know that there's been an intake process, and we have had opportunity to make submissions on the draft versions of the bill. Again, Chair, I think without proper information about the socioeconomic impact assessments and the full picture having been supplied, at least from a version provided by the legislature in this regard, an opportunity to comment on that or make input on that, I think that that consultation process failed to a degree. We're trying to rectify this with the information that we can supply, but in that regard, I think the consultation without meaningful engagement and opportunity to try and convince at least people about on facts and figures that have been scientifically provided, studied, verified, that is not meaningful consultation. I think, Chair, if a single version without proper engagement on what is submitted from the sector side has actually been submitted, and you hear my frustration, I think that was also part of the question that you asked, Honourable Member Matubatse. Honourable Member Khumalo, is that correct? You had questions also about what is meant by severely restrictive. Again, significant additional layers of legislation that have been added by this draft bill, which require far more enforcement capacity that will be required in terms of this act. And I think that is highly restrictive as well. Again, we believe, and again, part of our submissions, this not really being what this bill should be trying to achieve. Additional regulation is not going to achieve anything. We need, first and foremost, proper enforcement of the laws that, to the degree that they're sufficient, are currently in place. Without adding additional restrictions, which has the unforeseen consequence of driving legal producers of tobacco leaf out of the market, and including or allowing those illegal producers to find their foothold in the South African market. I think the question as to where the illegal or the 70% of illegal cigarettes, that's been answered already. And Honourable Khumalo, thank you for those questions as well. Honourable Member Sene, you had questions about the socioeconomic impact assessment, and I think, Chair, you've also raised that issue about the verification of where that lies, what happened to it, was it properly circulated? I think that will be established. Then the question, Honourable Member Sene, about whether Agri SA supports stricter requirements. Chair, I think through you, no, we don't, unless you can enforce those legislations and prove that you can enforce it to the ultimate, betterment of a situation. As to the general health of our population and the harmful effects of cigarettes that obviously come into play there, then no. We first say, get your house in order and make sure that we have a proper legislative and enforcement system in place before moving on to stricter requirements, which I said before, has the unforeseen consequence of driving out the legal producers and allowing those illegal ones to enter the market or the value chain altogether. Then I think the question, also another question with respect to marketing and whether that limits use of cigarettes. I think there are numerous studies on that, and I'm turning to Mr. Fonamara, and he could elaborate on that. This is not so much an agricultural point of view, but I think we've seen a phase out of marketing altogether. Whether this has actually led to a decrease in tobacco use and cigarette use in particular, I don't think so. I think more people are using cigarettes simply and marketing has very little to do with that at this stage. And Mr. van der Merwe might want to come in there. I just want to dispose with your, thank you for your comment about the court case and about the implications of the court case on marketing altogether. Well noted and a good point raised. That dispenses with the questions raised by Honourable Member Sene. Mr. van der Merwe, was there anything you wanted to add on this point?
No, I can just say that the marketing, obviously, as Mr. Rabie said, farmers in South Africa produce their leaf according to very, very high standards, adhering to all South African regulatory requirements. There are very strict requirements in terms of use of pesticides, the labour law, and the industry lumps further requirements on tobacco farmers. For example, as from next year, coal may not be used in South Africa for the curing of tobacco. So, that's in line with our ESG and our country's ESG objectives and goals. So farmers are moving out from coal and using sustainable renewable energy sources and things like that. So South African farmers are under very strict control, but obviously they don't sell the final product. They sell to a processor. The processor processes the leaf, and the processed leaf goes into a manufacturer who manufactures the final products. And as we know, that marketing in the tobacco industry is long gone. There's no more advertising. There's no more billboards. There's nothing like that. The only place where tobacco products may be advertised is at the point of sale. And even that, Chair, there are strict requirements. And here again, I'm looking at the Department of Health. Why are those requirements of advertising restrictions at the point of sale not being enforced? You go into some points of sale and it's completely out of control. It's completely out of bounds. That's a simple thing there. Mrs. Sene also made the point to prevent induction access to tobacco products. That's a classical example. Make sure that the current regulations of advertising at the point of sale is strictly enforced. But now you go the next step and you say ban it, take it under the counter. That's extreme. That's impossible to enforce, and it opens up the opportunity to go under the counter, go under uncontrolled, unregulated, impossible to enforce, and again you stimulate consumption. Thank you, Mr. Rabie.
Thank you, Chair. If I can carry on, I think Honourable Member Zungela had questions. I think two of them were dispensed to. We've dealt with those about illicit trading. Is this happening in our farming industry? And what are local producers actually doing that? I think the explanation given by Mr. van der Merwe was sufficient there, unless any further clarification is required. You also added a question, Honourable Member Zungela, about how do we manage this, and the role of SARS. And you asked the additional question about what is an organisation such as Agri SA doing with respect to legality. Our purpose.
Okay, the name is Zungula. Zungula.
Apologies, Chair, and thank you for that correction. Agri SA stands for a lawful sector altogether. Legality is non-negotiable. We cannot defend the indefensible, including lawlessness. We must make sure that the laws are properly constructed, that they're enforceable, that they've been properly informed by the appropriate studies and consultations to be actually implementable and achieve the aims that they do. So the role of SARS is obviously very important here, but our sector is involved in making sure that our sector role players and our producers operate lawfully and that protects our sector as a whole and protects the entire basis upon which our society is actually created, about a state of legality, a constitutionally protected state where laws govern and enforce to ensure that our society is properly regulated. I'll leave it at that, Chair, and apologies again, Honourable Member Zungula. We had, Chair, through you, another question. You'll have to help me with pronunciation. Tetlape, Honourable Member Tetlape, on that. You asked interesting questions, Chair, which I might be slightly beyond me about global alternatives, the role of nicotine from tobacco in, for instance, I presume vaping devices and alternative delivery methods for nicotine. How that comes into play, and I'm going to defer to Mr. van der Merwe about that. And I think some of the additional questions he'll also take up. I think those questions at a similar line to them, and to the degree that he hands over to me, I'll take that over again. But Mr. van der Merwe might expand on that.
Thank you, Honourable Chair and Honourable Letlape, Mr. Rabi. Farmers produce tobacco leaf mainly, which is used in, at the moment, mainly cigarettes, cigarette tobacco, pipe tobacco, snuff, and so on. Farmers are very well aware of the industry developments and of new generation products. And that's comforting because we inform our farmers. They have to know what's going. The farmers understand that there's an objective to reduce the consumption of smoking tobacco, like cigarettes and so on. So, and that's positive. Are farmers afraid of it? They're not afraid of it. They embrace it because farmers also understand the health risks with the product that they produce. But the farmers remain of the view that at the moment there is still a big market for cigarettes in South Africa, which will gradually reduce if we have proper enforcement, if we have good regulation in place, if all cigarettes are legal. Farmers understand that their product's demand will reduce, but it will happen over a long time. But that's not the end of the road for farmers. Farmers also know that new generation products, most of them require nicotine. Nicotine is mostly produced by the leaf. It's inside, it's implicit in the leaf. And although there are developments of artificial nicotine production and manufacturing, most of the nicotine still comes from the plant. So that means that tobacco farmers, and this is good news, will have a future, even if the consumption of cigarettes becomes so low that it's not viable anymore. They will still require nicotine, and there can be projects. We have good farmers, we have the best farmers in the world, and if there are manufacturers going forward who make liquid nicotine in South Africa going forward to embrace the concept of harm reduction, of which farmers fully support, then we have the infrastructure, we have the farmers, we have the knowledge. It comes from the same plant. It's going to grow on the same farm. It's going to employ the same number of people, and it's going to remain, it's going to keep a sector intact, especially in the rural areas where jobs are hard to find, and we do not want to see tobacco farmers disappear. It's one of the highest employers per hectare in the country. You need 1.5 to 2 laborers per hectare of tobacco grown. Now, there's not many agricultural commodities that can claim that figure. So it's something we need to treasure in the legal industry for the cigarette market now, Dr. Letlape, as well as for the future of nicotine production. So that's a positive view on that question. I just want to make one comment, Chair, that some of the honourable colleagues made also relates to farming, that this bill is not about illicit. The view from the farmers is all we want is a regulated market and enforcement where the playing field is level. Then we accept reduced consumption and all those things. But in our humble view, Chair, the farmers view that this committee must balance the health issues with the economic issues. It's not one or the other. This is also not about smoking or whatever. Everybody wants consumption to reduce. But get the playing field level, let everybody in the market comply, then the prices of cigarettes in the market will go up. It will automatically reduce consumption. With that comes the concept of tobacco harm reduction, which we have to embrace, which our regulatory framework needs to regulate differently. And then we have a win-win situation, because you can't wish tobacco away. Consumption is going to decline over a very long period of time if you have proper laws in place and if they are properly enforced and all the taxes are collected. And it's not only SARS, it's also the DOH who is failing our health agenda by not enforcing their own laws. And by that, we have a win-win situation. The tobacco tax base will remain intact. The farmers will remain intact. The health agenda will be fulfilled because consumption will decline. We'll have a tobacco harm reduction agenda, which we'll embrace, and we'll have a win-win situation. Thank you, Mr. Rob.
As you come towards the end.
Yeah. Chair, I think we've covered most of the questions, at least as far as Honourable Member Leklape is concerned.
Yeah.
We did have questions from Honourable Member Tsehu, and we did have yours to deal with. But I think we're very close to having done all of those, Chair. I might add the one point I think that was raised, in particular the photo that was in the presentation. There was no intention with that. This was about the jobs in the industry, and we certainly appreciate the sensitivity to that. There was nothing meant by that particular photo as such, but this is the livelihoods that we're concerned about. Chair, I'm in your hands. We might just repeat some of the questions that have been asked. There have been certain issues about the focus on youth uptake, the requirement of assistance to farmers if new markets might be created, but I'm not sure whether this is actually going to add to anything further at this stage, unless we want to have those a discussion about that. And then obviously the question, it was a health and safety question about the exposure of farm workers to the risks of smoking, which I think is also a little bit beyond. I might make a comment about it, but Chair, I'm in your hands as far as that is concerned.
We have 3 more minutes left for you. We really have given you more time, at least in answering questions. Do time yourself when you answer and go gallop. Now we have only 3 minutes to wrap up.
Thank you, Chair. A general concern is that, we also heard this from the department, that illicit is not really their problem. The main reason why health agenda is failing in this country is because of illicit. So if this committee does not take the addressing of illicit trade and getting the playing field level, we will keep on failing. By making new laws is not the answer. Tobacco has a cost. Yes, it also has a contribution. But that's not the argument. The argument is there are 11 million smokers in this country who have the right to use the product. They cannot use it anywhere. There must be proper regulation. And those cigarettes or the products that they use must all be legal. And it's for this committee to look at the bigger picture and say, how do we reduce the consumption of harmful products over time by not killing the economic contribution of the industry? Because whether you like it or not, 35 to 37 billion cigarettes are going to be smoked in this country for the foreseeable future. It's about how do we decrease it over time, and by excessive regulation with a bad enforcement history of the department, it's not going to work. And that's the message to the committee, is let's go back to the drawing board and let us develop a bill that encapsulates South African market reality, which is written by South Africans, on which everybody makes a contribution, and not written by NGOs such as this one is being done. Then everybody will be happy and we'll have a win-win situation. Thank you, Chair.
No, now you going back to the drawing boards, you must beef up what we already have. I don't know about going back to the drawing boards, but I think all of us who have listened to yourself, thank you very much for your contribution. It's been an eye-opener for some of us on some of the things that you raised, because at the end of it, collectively, this committee will then have to, having listened to all of the presenters, then refine what we have in front of us. If the Department of Health is here listening, please let us begin positively, all of us as South Africans, move away from the thinking that illicit tobacco is none of our business. Somebody else must address it. It's not going to assist the process we are engaged in. Let us, in whatever way, contribute towards that part, because it's always a hindrance to look into it. In whichever way you listen and you look at it, it comes up very often. And it's probably within this area that people were explaining it very well. But let's mend this as we go along. There are certain gaps. If there are, let us patch them. Don't get a sense that let's start all over again with something else. There are certain things that are here and we need to get going. But we welcome you and we thank you for the contribution you have made. I would really ask you to, because you probably have got some contacts. In Europe, there are countries that have gone away from smoking and they moved into something else, which is pouches. Please, if you do have information, share that with us and get those countries to interact and share with you what has been the progress in terms of that once introduced into those countries. It is something that is possibly going to assist the whole world. And if there are people who are advanced in terms of doing that, let us also tap into their understanding. I would look forward to hearing from you, or maybe send those information to our secretariat that will assist us going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank
Mr.
you, Chair. Thank you for the opportunity and thank you for the time today. Much appreciated.
Thank you. Honorable members, it will be a 3-minute stretch break while Ms. Machalamba and the team from Agri Bees is putting their presentation, and Agree who is doing it. Is it asking for sharing rights, or they already have got it and then they start? Just a 3-minute stretch break, get another glass of water, and then so that we get out of those chairs. 3 minutes, honorable members. Thanks. Then we start. Yes, we have another institution called Agribees. Okay. Among other things, they will educate us how far they are not the growers. They are not the agricultural South Africa, they grow tobacco. They're probably processing it. We learn from that. We now give you an opportunity. Welcome to the team from Agribees. We have received your submission yesterday or a day before, and we went through it, and we are sort of familiar with your slides. However, you are given an opportunity now to take through this portfolio committee on the presentation. Thereafter, we should limit to not more than 30 minutes. Thereafter, the honorable members will ask you clarity-seeking questions, comments, and you'll come back again to respond to those questions of the honorable members. So your 30 minutes starts now with your introductions of the team that is here, and then take it from there. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Chair. My name is Annelies Crosby. I'm the Legal Intelligence Manager at Agris. I'm assisted by Tapelo Mashaba, who is an economist and policy analyst. Tapelo will present the first 6 slides, and I will take over from there. Thank you very much, Tapelo. I'll run the slides for you from the side.
Thank you, Annelies. Chair, with your, can I please switch off the camera with your agreement?
We have never even switched it on. We don't know you. We haven't seen.
I was on the screen, sir. This is me.
All right, maybe the presentation is hiding you. That's fine. If that's comfortable for you, let's do that way.
Thank you, Chair. Maybe let me start by thanking you, Chair, and the committee for giving us as AGBIS this opportunity to present. What we are going to focus on today would be the tobacco value chain, who we are as AGBIS, the economic value that the tobacco industry provides to South Africans, the farming jobs that are reliant on this industry, the NEDLEC processes that we went through, and then the specific comments. If you can go through, Annalise. Who is AGBIS? The Agricultural Business Chamber is a member organization. We represent over 100 members within the South African agribusiness value chain, ranging from your banks, your commodity groups, your cooperative, your input suppliers, agribusinesses, development finance institutions, and so on. We mainly focus on ensuring that all agribusinesses in South Africa that we represent play a constructive role within the country's economic growth. We also play in development. We do a lot of rural rejuvenation projects. We also assist most of our members with the transformation agenda. And on top of that, we create an enabling environment for agribusinesses of all sizes to thrive in South Africa and be competitive. Annalise, if you can just go through. On the right, if you have seen a chairperson, is all the members that we represent. So the agricultural value chain, the tobacco value chain relies not only on farmers, it also connects multiple sectors within that industry that also have a ripple effect on other members, on other various services that are associated with that value chain. So for instance, we have your global producers of seeds that produces specified or highly specified varieties of seeds that will be affected. It affects your supply of fertilizers, which are your herbicides and your pesticides. It also affects the equipment and infrastructure providers. As the previous speaker mentioned, it also has to do with the banking services that are given in that space. A lot goes into research and development. So essentially, this whole value chain touches from a range of service producers within the supply chain. I think what we are trying to say is the tobacco value chain does not only have to do with farmers, it also has to do with almost every producer or player that is aligned within the value chain. Next slides, please, Annalise. Farming jobs and reliance on the agricultural sector. Tobacco is grown in the Eastern Cape, Limpopo, Mpumalanga, and Northwest, also the Western Cape, as the previous speaker also mentioned. And some of those provinces are one of our poorest provinces in the country. And maybe I should mention that the tobacco industry is labor intensive, meaning that for every hectare, it supports about 1 to 2 jobs, which is crucial in the current economic environments that we have. We want to keep the jobs that we have, and the value chain, the tobacco value chain, is giving us quite a lucrative labor space. And the people within this value chain are also supported in terms of school fees, some programs, social development programs that the tobacco producing people have within the regions that they're operating within. Pre-COVID, leaf farmers provided jobs and stable incomes for almost 179 commercial farmers and 127 emerging farmers, with 400 to 600 people employed in the processing industry and 3,554 people in the manufacturing sector. And due to the loss of market to the illicit sector, we, like the previous members spoke, we have less than 50 commercial farmers left and a very few left black farmers. I think, if I'm being correct, is almost 10 that are left. So the economic value that the tobacco industry brings to South Africa, the South African tobacco market is about is somewhere between 39 to 42 billion rands. That's the market size that we have at this point. But it is important to also state that various results show that the illicit market has taken over. I think there's about 50%, if not as high as 70% illicit trade happening within the South African market. I think what we're trying to say as AGBIS is the bill in its current form will exacerbate this, which means a very small portion of the market will be regulated in accordance with the law. And the biggest part of the market will be non-compliant and unregulated, which in turn will nullify the objective of reduced consumption. So I think as an organization, we want to make sure that public health issues are dealt with. Also, economic issues are also dealt with. So there should be a balance between the public health issues and economic issues. I will then now pass over to Ms. Annelies Crosby to continue with the presentation.
Thank you so much, Tapelo. Chairperson, so the next slide is about the NETLAC process. AGBIS, amongst other organizations, called for a clause-by-clause NETLAC process in our written submission. This process has now happened, and there is a report from NETLAC before the Portfolio Committee. We were part of the BUSA delegation in NETLAC, and we support the BUSA positions on the bill as set out in the NETLAC report. What is important, Chair, is that business raised 3 fundamental issues of concern in the NETLAC report. Those are the following. It was the fact that there was external influence in policy development by anti-tobacco NGOs, international NGOs. The socioeconomic impact assessment, which was raised by Agri SA as well, had some gaps in terms of what it looked at and on which version of the bill it was based. And then there were also certain constitutional implications that were raised by business specifically about the separate product categories regulated by the bill, the tobacco products as well as the electronic delivery systems. So the business signed the NETLAC report at the end of the day, but we signed it subject to these specific considerations or sort of problems that we still had with that were not properly taken aboard in the NETLAC report itself. So the specific comments that we would like to highlight, Chair, there are only a couple of clauses that we specifically want to point out to you. One is clause 3, dealing with advertising, promotion, etc. I think it's important, Chair, to state, and we all know this, but it sometimes gets lost in the debate. Tobacco products are legal products. But the extent to which they are now being regulated or will be regulated after this bill has passed is not applicable to any other kind of legal product in this country. So we fully recognize the potential harmful consequences of smoking. But this kind of restriction is unique. It doesn't apply to any other legal products in the country, and it's a very severe restriction on the free market. These retail display restrictions will limit consumers' ability to make informed product choices, and it also potentially removes the variety of tobacco products from the visibility of customers. And these new measures will set an unreasonable barrier to entry for newcomers to the manufacturing market, because they have no way of really distinguishing themselves and make their brands known. Also, we know that these display restrictions are unlikely to be effectively enforced, and this may create an additional compliance burden on the legitimate supply chain with illicit operators that will simply continue operating as normal and further undermining the viability of the legal businesses. So in NETLAC, business proposed the deletion of specifically section 3.5a to e, and suggested that this be replaced by new clauses providing for wholesalers or retailers to display cigarettes on the outside and inside of their places of business, but showing a warning that the sale of relevant and related products to children is prohibited, and we support this proposal. Then clause 4, dealing with the standardized packaging and labeling of tobacco products. Branding in our world today is critically important in the marketplace. The prohibition on using any type of branding is very restrictive, and once again does not apply to other products sold in South Africa. The requirement that prohibits labeling and branding results in premium products becoming indistinguishable from other economy products. In Nedlac, business opposed the standardization of packaging and labeling, and it pointed to the fact that this will only exacerbate South Africa's already critical illicit trade problem, and we also support this point of view. There were also certain constitutional concerns raised in Nedlac about the plain packaging provisions, especially how these relate to the protection of rights such as property, intellectual property rights, and the freedom of expression, which is also protected in our constitution. Clause 12, Chair, which deals with the Product Monitoring Committee, the wide-ranging powers that are granted to this committee. We do believe that the functions and powers should be very clearly set out. Business argued in Nedlac that a more effective approach would be to establish a committee of intergovernmental bodies comprising of senior representatives from the different enforcement agencies. The current proposal that allows the minister to appoint individuals that without requiring the necessary technical expertise or institutional representation may create a situation where certain interest groups dominate this monitoring committee, and that is something that we need to avoid. Then, as far as the regulations are concerned, I think Agri SA also raised this. The powers granted to the minister is quite extensive. We also believe that there needs to be more parliamentary oversight in terms of regulations and the making of regulations, because there is a concern that these wide-ranging powers can bypass constitutional checks and balances. So in Nedlac, business raised these constitutional governance concerns and argued that the provisions that grant the minister overly broad discretionary powers without providing sufficient parameters, guidelines, and oversight mechanisms. So we believe that Parliament should provide these guidelines and ensure that the delegated powers are exercised in accordance with the constitutional provisions. So, Chair, we fully understand that the Portfolio Committee of Health is looking at this from a health perspective, as you should be doing. But there is a broader perspective, and I think Agri SA has also argued this. So we need to look not only at the health concerns, which we take on board are very important, but we need a more holistic approach where we'll also look at the impact of these proposed restrictions on jobs, on the economy, on taxes, and the broader value chain. So that is what we would like to leave you with, Chair. Thank you very much.
Okay. Honorable members, as you are raising your hand, let me start with Honorable Van Staden, who has indicated that after 12 o'clock is already on his road driving towards Parliament. I might probably give him a space to ask now, and then only make that special arrangement to get those questions attended to before we get into our own other methods. Not that you honorable members are not going to go to Parliament too, but he has made that special request and I noted it. Honorable Van Staden, you start now, and then thereafter the team will reply to your questions, then I will take other hands.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, for your indulgence. Just 3 questions from my side. I just want to know, what have you done on your part to address the illegal trade in cigarettes and tobacco in South Africa? What will be the solution to curb the illegal trade in tobacco and at the same time take into account the health of South Africans? And how many small traders and community retailers will be forced out of business when this bill come into effect. Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you very much.
Okay, come back to you to really supply the responses.
Chair, yeah, so just quickly, I mean, similar to what Jansen Robbie said, you know, for ACBIS, it's important that our members comply with the law. And we are we're not the tobacco industry, we are the broader agricultural industry, bringing the broader perspective to you. We think that there are things that can be done in terms of enforcement, through, you know, better enforcement through the police, through the prosecuting authorities, through SARS. And all that we can really do as an industry is to encourage compliance with the legislation once the legislation is in place. Chair, if Honourable van Staden can just quickly repeat the second question.
How many these formal or informal traders will be taken out of? Just repeat, Honourable van Staden.
Yeah,
second
Chair, I don't have those statistics available, Chair. I can try and get them and supply them in writing to the Portfolio Committee. I don't have them at this point in time.
Okay, the second question was, what will be the solutions to curb the illegal trade in tobacco and at the same time take into account the health of South Africans? Thank you.
Yeah, so I think you know, it is about enforcement, and it is about education and awareness. That the answer probably lies in those two components.
Honourable members, may I then recognize you through hands? Thanks, Honourable van Staden. I'll at least you keep a chair for me in Parliament. I'm coming. There's a hand of Honourable Michelle Clark that has come up, number 2 on the list, so she'll come now. Honourable Clark, Honourable number 2 will be Sine. I'm still waiting for the hands. Honourable members, I don't see hands coming up. Okay, let's start Honourable Clark, followed by Honourable Sine. Other members will then shout to ask for my attention. That is Honourable Totale Tlape. After Totale Tlape, just shout after that and say you want to speak, because I'm now starting the process. Honourable Clark, followed by Honourable Sine. That one will be Honourable Totale Tlape. Other members will shout if they need to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. I just would like to get the view of the presenter in terms of what we were told in the previous presentation. And I find this very concerning, that there were 150 emerging black farmers within the tobacco industry you know, before. And of those 150, only 10 emerging farmers have been left in the system, and that the balance would now probably, you know, have to apply for grants once again in order to survive. And for me, that is an unbelievable, worrying a statistic. Can I please get the view of the presenters in terms of this matter? Thank you.
Honourable Sine. Honourable Sine, are you struggling? Okay, we'll come back to her. Honourable Dr. Letlape.
Thank you, Chair. My question is just in terms of agribiz, is it concentrated on businesses that are related to the tobacco leaf, or are the alternative nicotine delivery system part of what you look at? And if so, what is your opinion on the impact of the bill on that? Things like vapes, heat not ban, nicotine pouches. That's my fundamental question, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Honourable Sine. Okay, she's not available. If she comes in, any other member who wants to come through? Okay, she's struggling. I don't know. From my side, I will wait for another one, but let me just, yes.
Sir, sorry there's a bit of noise here. I don't know what they are fixing in the offices here. My apology. Sir, I just want to follow through on the loss that was suffered in respect of the emerging black farmers. How did the industry allow such a big number of people to leave? Were there any lessons that were learned to have such an exodus? Was there any, because I'm just thinking, whether there was real support to these farmers by the industry itself, because it is not secret that the white farmers are at the advantage level, or perhaps during the period, will my suspicion hold that the uh, uh, that the black farmers necessarily were held there on the BEE card by the white farmers. I just want to confirm that, because it's really shocking what has happened and what is being done now to recruit those to come into the agricultural center. Thanks, sir. Sorry for the noise. There's nothing that I can do about it.
Understood. Thank you. I've since received an information from Honorable Sine that she's struggling with connectivity. Some members have started traveling to Parliament. Let me just check once more if she's able to now. If not, then I will read her question. Honorable Sine? Yeah, okay. Let me then start with my. Thanks for the presentation. Now, you need to actually. It's good that you mentioned you're aware of. Musa is still coming, by the way, to make their presentation to us. The date I don't know yet. So maybe you need not to go too much in details about what they will say to us. But I don't know where this narrative comes from, that there was a flood of external or international space. Are they talking about the people who were the attendees in the NETLEC meeting, for which then that is out of our space? Because I would determine who speaks in this meeting and who participates, because there's a properly constituted portfolio committee of health. Now, what are you referring to in terms of the international invading of the space of NETLEC, or of the drafting of what? So please explain that part, because it did come up there. And in the presentation of NETLEC, they're making very explicit that they are representatives of entities, the government, the business, the trade union, and civil society who sit there. I can't come in that space again. I'm not part of that component. Therefore, explain exactly what did you mean on this part. The third part from my side, I see that amongst the stakeholders that are involved in your processes is CSIR. What is the role of CSIR within your programs? Fourth, are you aware or not aware of any country that, among other things, in strengthening its regulations on tobacco, went the way of plain packaging? From your presentation, it sounds like it would be the first of its kind in the world that there's a plain packaging with warning signs. Would you be saying maybe you have a limited knowledge of that space, or you are actually confirming that if that is the way to go, it will be the first of its kind in the country? Let me just check what Honorable Senior had written for me to say on her behalf. Okay. You also you probably provide a bit of a response with issues of this illicit of 60 to 65%, what do you think could be done with that? You made an assertion that the social economic impact assessment study was not done on the version of the bill currently under discussion. Now, that process is beyond us. It is done before the bill comes to Parliament. And I would imagine those discussions should have and must have taken place in NEDLAC, because it's Cabinet, NEDLAC, and us as Parliament. And if then there's that lacuna, did Musa raise it in, or did you know if it was raised in NEDLAC, and how is the department planning to close that? If you could confirm that actually indeed that is a correct statement that we are making about the social impact, the social economic impact assessment. Please assist us with your responses.
Thank you very much, Chair. Chair, so first of all, there were two questions around the emerging farmers, the black farmers that we have lost in this tobacco industry. And indeed, this is something that we all should be very concerned about, because it's hard to establish black farmers in the farming sector generally. There are a lot of obstacles that are facing them, and it's not easy for them to move into the commercial space. So when we lose them, it's a really big blow. So in this case, in addition to all the normal obstacles that they face in terms of funding and markets and getting assistance and all of that, their market was basically totally eroded by the illicit trade, as was explained by Mr. Francois van der Merwe previously. So in our understanding is that is what led to that tremendous drop in their numbers. Chair, then there was a question of whether we are focused on the tobacco leaf only or also concerned about the vaping products, etc. I think primarily at the moment I'm concerned about the leaf. But it is important, also that other new products are now coming to the fore, and some of these apparently have the potential to reduce nicotine use and all of that. But I think our concern at this stage is around the leaf primarily. There are other organizations that can talk to the vaping and the other tobacco delivery systems. In terms of, you said Buso was still coming to present to you, and you had a question about the international NGOs in the NEDLAC process. There was a person that is from an international NGO that participated on behalf of government. He was part of the government delegation in NEDLAC, and many of the views expressed there by government also very similar to the views that are held by some of these international anti-tobacco NGOs. So that is where that concern arises from. We did rise it in NEDLAC, but it wasn't really contained in the report. There's only a short mention of it. And that is why it was one of the reservations of business when we signed the report, because we thought that this, there was undue influence in this process from that perspective. There was a question about the CSIR. I mean, the CSIR is a member of AGBIS. We have over 100 members. We deliver services to all our members, so they don't have a particular role within AGBIS. They are just one of our members. The plain packaging, Chair, what we were trying to say in our presentation is that in South Africa, I think that is unique. It may have happened in other countries. I don't have personal knowledge of that, but I'm not aware of any other products in South Africa that are legal products that are treated in a similar way. And then, Chair, the SAYAS, you are correct that it may be beyond Parliament. We did raise this in NEDLAC as well. Once again, it wasn't contained in the report to our satisfaction.
I don't know whether it's on my side that I don't hear any sound anymore.
Maybe some unintended consequences flowing from this bill. So, business proposed regarding the SAIAs that Parliament should consider the concerns that were raised and decide if an independent study should be commissioned or not. Chair, I think those were all the questions. If I missed any, please just alert me to them.
Yeah, no thanks. A lot of what you are saying is part of it alerting us to certain potential gaps that might have existed in the process, which we need to close and say, Department, what is here? Network, did you have this part? And therefore, how do you have to close it? But your contribution here is also welcomed. It will form part of our overall discussion as a portfolio committee when we go through this bill and finalizing it. We thank you very much. We might interact with you requesting some other written additional issues that might have slipped from our discussion. But thanks for honoring the invitation and for the sharing of the information with us.
Thank you, Chair. And with regards to those 3 reservations to the NEDLAC report, we can provide you with something in writing around that as well, if it will assist.
Please do. Thank you very much. Yeah. Okay. Honorable members, as the presenters are leaving us, I'm informed that the agenda is a bit longer than what we have. There are some minutes to be actually adopted. But prior to that, let me give an opportunity to Taletlaphe, who has requested just to speak on this process before we get the minutes. You can as well be putting the minutes up, Ms. Machalamba, while I give the platform to Dr. Letlape.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask, Chair, whether it would be possible for the committee to be able to debrief after each presentation so that we're not waiting for all the things to be done to discuss what has come out and where we're at. We had the presentation from NEDLAC. We never had an opportunity to talk amongst ourselves as a committee. We've had these presentations today so that we'll be able to have a session to debrief on them, whether it is after the presentations are made or it's at a separate meeting. But my appeal, Chair, is we need to be able to digest what is being put to us on a systematic basis so that we're not constipated at the end of the many presentations.
Okay. Let us maybe park that with the first that it's an important point you are raising. It might assist us, but maybe we could agree to say after 2 or 3, maybe like today we have got 2, to say, can we find time to reflect on these 2? We probably were not ready for it today to happen as a good idea. It makes sense rather than to put it as constipation, to lump it all one place and therefore say we are now discussing it, to take it as we move along. Can I hear other members of the committee? It may not start today, obviously, because we were not aware and we were not ready for it, but it's a point to be digested so that it avoids constipation. From my side, if I were now to input, is to say it's a possible point, but maybe not after each and every. Maybe agree to say we have listened to 3 or 4 presentations. Let us reflect on what do they mean to us and package that and just have a sort of a reflection on that. I don't know. Were you suggesting after each and every one, or maybe in a place we sort of group them under 3 or 4? Because in the past we have not done that, and maybe the way disadvantages of not doing that, but also advantages in the sense that we're getting over and done with the work and therefore collating it. I would also want to get a comment from our secretary, but let me go back to you to say, how do you plan that to group them, or after each and every one, we then have a space to raise or round it up? Totally clap.
We can do both, sir. After each one, we just have 5 or 10 minutes for anybody that would want to raise any points. And we'd then have a formal session where 3 or so would be reviewed, because it would then give us time to go collect our thoughts, work on what was said, what was asked, and we come up with an open discussion on all those 3.
Okay.
That would be my suggestion, Chair.
Honorable members, you are listening, and then I can get your reflections here now of this suggestion, or we comment on it in our WhatsApp. But let me start opening it up now here, if there are any views that can be raised by honorable members. Thank you. I know some might not be available. They are traveling already, driving, and they thought we are done and they are switching off. Dr. Letlape, let me put this again in our chat.
Chair. Oh, Chair. Oh, okay.
Yes, let me just see. There are hands. There's one. Motubase's hand is up, and the one of Honorable Clark also is up. Yes, Honorable Motumase, start with you.
No, thanks, Chair. Yeah, I think I was just thinking about it. It makes sense because when things are still fresh, it's better to deal with them and consolidate those issues and dispense with them. And Secretariat, in the meantime, with the support team, can consolidate what we had made input on and what we had agreed upon. I think I'll support that, but. Yeah, I think those are my points. But also, I wanted to see if I can find space to divert a little bit, just to request in terms of informing the committee, in terms of our case studies, like we've been discussing in corridors outside. What are the processes there? Any possibility? But also, us sitting to get a scientific. Because I was thinking just to get a scientific research input, are there any people that we can possibly invite to come and make such a presentation on our own accord? I apologize if I've diverted a bit, but I just wanted those 2 points to be considered. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, Honorable Clark.
Thank you, Chairperson. Yeah, I think it's a good idea, but I think we need to make space for several presentations. So, I just think it takes up a lot of time to do one at a time. Maybe we can do, as you said, 2 or 3, presentations at a meeting and then continue with business of the day. Thank you.
Okay, I'll speak to Ms. Matalamba and see if these 2 can then be summarized in our next session before we start, and then use it that space on that. But we'll also put it again on the group. Honorable Mutubase, it is this committee that will decide and indicate that maybe halfway or at the end we need that expert opinion, because we would have to wrap it up someday with some other independent experts on either or on the tobacco industry and also on the issues of reducing smoking. So we may just have to continue with this work now and someday have that process awaiting us. Is that a new hand, Dr. Letlape? Old hand, legacy hand?
It's a new hand, Chair.
Yes, Dr. Letlape.
The point I was trying to illustrate, for example, from today's proceedings, it would be important to get information about the role of the Department of Monitoring and Evaluation in terms of the socio-economic impact studies, because those allegations are allegations that would impact on issues of process. We cannot have something that was supposed to be done being deferred, saying it will be done later, but other things are done before that because the things are in tandem, something like that. So we could ask for that type of information to be brought to us. If you go back to the previous presentation, Ned Leck spoke about the fact that there was a meeting of scientists in January, but nothing about science was referred to when they reported to us. So we could ask for information like that, Chair. And then, as everybody says, the greater deliberation would then be based on other gaps that need to be filled before we have the greater deliberation on 2 or 3 sessions. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, yeah, no, it makes sense. Let us work on that and make it a work in progress. It will be a new venture, but which is seemingly taking us forward much quicker and maybe also mindful of the work that we are still have to do, but it will be welcomed. Ms. Machalamba, I'd requested that you flight the minutes and then we deal with them because you are saying it was part of our agenda for today. Won't know which one you are going to start with. I'll see when you flash that you are raising the minutes of the 14th to set 14th and the 22nd. That we met in the Touch Hall and briefing by the NETLEC and the meeting that was then stopped a bit. Honorable members, this presentation ended with NETLEC, which I need to actually show through that we're all present here. The meeting ended with NETLEC presenting. Oh no, this is now another one. Okay, no, this was an issue that was taken, the issue of Ahmed. So this issue, honorable members, was that we had a presentation from NETLEC and they extensively raised what they raised with us. And we asked more than what one would have asked for. Questions, there were too many. So the process ended up, so we adopted these minutes as a true reflection, I think, of what happened. But I wanted to add here to say, I think let us agree that there will be a day other than NETLEC writing back to us to say, NETLEC, we gave you all these, not all of them were then answered to. Can you find a time? And probably that will be a virtual meeting if members agree, but this is how it ended. And the committee also expressed concern that NETLEC was not afforded sufficient time to respond to the issues it had raised during the consultation process. So, which is a true reflection of our discussion, can I call for adoption and therefore make amendments that this is indeed what was discussed, but then I'm requesting that we consider bringing back NETLEC, obviously in a Zoom meeting, to then take us through those minutes, through those questions that they did not answer. Any honorable member who wants to raise that we adopt these minutes of the meeting with NETLEC, that yes, indeed, we worked there, we were having a meeting. I see Honorable Khumalo speak.
Thank you very much, Chair. I move for the adoption of these minutes with the amendment that the chairperson is making of calling NETLEC to respond to some of the questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for moving the agenda, for the moving of these minutes to be adopted. Any seconder? Okay. I'll call you Ms. Machalamba if you're not. Any seconder that these minutes were actually reflecting what happened on that day? Honorable Dr. Letlape?
Yes, I second, Chair.
Second, thank you very much. The minutes are truly adopted, and therefore, Ms. Machalamba, put it on the side. My request that me and you must arrange when we have a Zoom meeting with the NETLEC to go through some of the issues that are coming up even today, but also answering those questions. We'll work on that. Next set of minutes, Ms. Machalamba, will be the minutes of the 22nd, of the 16th, the next day. What happened then? Okay, we then had a meeting with the minister. This meeting was Zoom, where we asked the minister to come and update us. There was a presentation that he made. This is a meeting that was preparing us to be able to engage with the stakeholders in the civil society. We received that as an update, and there was, I think, some slides presented to us. And then we resolved that minister to enhance communication, that the minister advised, that the committee advised the minister to prioritize the identification and mobilization of domestic sources of funding. That the minister was further advised to ensure a consistent and timely sharing of relevant information rather than to keep it until too late and it causes anxiety. The committee recommended that the minister strengthens this engagement and coordination at SANAC level. Went on to say the committee called on the revival of that Zikhala Kanjani. The department must ensure that patients who were treated by PEPFAR funded are properly referred to these public health centers, and that the department was urged to intensify efforts aimed at reducing the rate of new HIV infections, recommended that they should establish continuous engagement and with the researchers too who are affected by this. So those are some of the recommendations that we proposed, and I would really now call upon our members to adopt this as a reflection of our discussion with the minister on that day, on the 16th of May. May I therefore request members to indicate?
Chairperson, Member Fisani have sent the message. She's having a problem about electricity in her area. But it is a message in the chat box.
Okay. Honorable Mutubati, so long. Let me look for them. Those who can't read. We are
No,
not
I move, Chair.
move for the.
Seconds, Chair.
Is that Honorable Teko?
Yes, Chair, I second.
Mutubasi, second by Honorable Teko. Thank you very much. The last set of minutes, Honorable, is the 22nd. Okay. While you are okay. While we are going to that, Ms. Batalamba, there's a minutes where what did we do here? We then had a meeting with the leadership of various institutions, researchers, TAC, veterans, to brief and talk to them about this withdrawal of paper funding. We gave them a slot to tell us what are their challenges, and the team of presenters. I think, members, just check your name that you are there, and apologies. And then after their presentation, we also engaged with them. We had clarity seeking questions and comments, then they came back to us. And I think I thank the members for holding on to that meeting. It could have been one of the explosive ones, but we were able to also contain ourselves. They were too able to contain ourselves, so that we are much better than where we were 10 and 15 years ago. So when we concluded that the chairperson informed both the committee and the coalition that a formal documentation summarizing these key issues arising from the meeting would be prepared and submitted to the minister, of which we are busy compiling that with Ms. Machalamba, and also committed that a meeting between the committee, the minister, and the coalition will be arranged. I'm going to check the progress of that with the minister on the House today as to where we are with that request that I made. Additionally, that chairperson encouraged the coalition to remain actively engaged in SANAC processes, because some of the members are part of that. So after that, we then adjourn the meeting. If this is a true reflection of our discussion, may I also get honorable members to indicate and we adopt these minutes? Either shout or a show of hand. Honorable Kumalo, again, recognition.
Thank you, Chair. I move for the adoption of the minutes.
Honorable Kumalo move for the adoption. Thank you very much. Any seconder?
Chair.
Honorable Peko seconds that adoption. So the minutes of the 22nd of May duly adopted. Thank you very much, honorable members. Does that bring us to the end of the meeting, Ms. Machalamba?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you, honorable members. Please do rush for those of you of us who are going to the House and sitting. Thank you very much. We'll meet again as this committee, I think, on the 2nd. What date, Ms. Machalamba?
On the 3rd, Chair.
The 3rd of June. We are already getting responses of other presenters, and they've indicated that they'll be available on the 3rd of June. Thank you very much, honorable members. Have a good day. We'll see you later. Bye-bye.